Welcome back, everybody, to another deep dive. I'm so excited about today's topic.
Me too.
We're going to be taking a deep dive into something you use every single day language.
Ah, yes.
More specifically, the history of the English
A
language.
history of English.
And to help us navigate this massive topic, we're using a fascinating YouTube video called A Short History of the English Language.
Yes, from the Generalist papers.
Yes. So get ready to have your mind blown because did you know almost half of the world's population speaks a language that's related to English?
It's true, yeah. Almost half the world speaks a language related to English. So what we're going to do today is we're going to trace its evolution.
Wow.
From its very ancient origins to its modern form. It's a linguistic family tree, really.
It really is.
That branches out across continents.
It's almost like a linguistic DNA test for English.
Exactly.
Like, where did all of its quirks and features come from?
Yeah.
So where do we even begin with a history this massive?
Well, we have to start with the Indo-European language family. This is an incredibly vast group of languages.
Huge.
A massive family tree.
Yeah.
So think about it. Think of a family tree with branches stretching from India all the way to Europe.
I'm trying to wrap my mind around that. So if I'm understanding this correctly, that means if someone speaks a European language, like French,
Yes.
or an Indian language like Hindi,
Mm-hmm.
there's a chance that their language is distantly related to English.
That's exactly right.
Whoa. Okay.
And within that huge family, English belongs to the Germanic branch,
Hmm?
alongside languages like, German and Swedish.
I see.
Uh-huh.
But how did English end up on that particular branch? It seems like we need to rewind the clock pretty far back for this, huh?
We do. We're going to have to head back to the 5th century AD.
Okay.
When the Romans, they had ruled over Britain for centuries, they left. And with their departure, a power vacuum emerged.
Okay, so this is where the Anglo-Saxons and Jutes come in.
You got it.
I always picture them sailing over from continental Europe, and they settle in these areas the Romans vacated. So how did that change the linguistic landscape of Britain?
Well, prior to their arrival, Celtic languages were spoken in Britain, along with some Latin, from the Roman period, of course.
Right, of course.
But the arrival of these Germanic tribes marked a significant shift in the dominant languages of the region, specifically the area we now call England.
So it was really this influx of Germanic languages that laid the foundation for what we now call Old English.
Precisely.
Oh.
Old English was the language spoken by these Anglo-Saxons. And to our modern ears,
Oh, yeah.
it sounds like a completely different language.
I can imagine. I mean, the YouTube video we're looking at actually has a clip of Beowulf.
Oh, yeah.
The epic poem.
In Old English.
In Old English. And I have to admit, I didn't understand a single word. It sounded more like a blend of German and, I don't know, something even older.
It's true. Old English is incredibly distant from the language we speak today.
Yeah.
But here's the fascinating part. Even though we can't easily understand Old English, it provided the basic building blocks for a lot of our core vocabulary.
So even though it sounds totally foreign, those Anglo-Saxons gave us words we still use every single day.
Like think about the word water
Okay. Water.
or child.
Child. Okay.
Even the word ear.
Ear.
Yeah, and even simple words like thee
Oh, yeah.
and talk all have their roots in Old English.
Wow.
It's quite remarkable to think about that kind of linguistic continuity over centuries.
It really is. It's like uncovering those ancient artifacts, you know?
Yeah.
But instead of pottery shards, we're finding the building blocks of our language. But language doesn't just stay frozen in time, does it?
You're absolutely right. Old English, like all languages, was constantly evolving. And what we're going to see next is how some pretty dramatic changes to the English language came from some pretty unexpected sources.
Okay.
Invasions and cultural interactions.
I'm picturing armies clashing and languages clashing. What kind of invasion are we talking about here?
Okay, so imagine you're living in England in the 8th century.
Okay, 8th century, got it.
And suddenly, Viking ships appear on the horizon.
Okay, hold on to your helmets, everyone. I know the Vikings had a bit of a reputation for aggressive expansion,
Yeah, they did.
but did they actually speak a different language from the Anglo-Saxons?
They did. The Vikings, who raided and settled in England, primarily came from Denmark and Norway.
Okay,
And they spoke Old Norse, which is, the ancestor of modern Scandinavian languages.
I see.
Uh,
So how did this influx of Old Norse speakers change the English language? Was it just adding a bunch of words for, weapons and warfare?
well, there were definitely some vocabulary additions related to warfare and, ships and things like that.
Right, yeah.
But the impact of Old Norse goes far beyond that. Many basic words we use every day came from those Viking interactions.
Like, what? Give me some examples. This is the part where it gets really exciting, like uncovering these hidden linguistic connections.
Think about the word sky.
Sky, okay.
Bag, yeah. And even the pronoun they.
They.
These
Yeah.
are all words we inherited from Old Norse speakers.
That's so cool.
And even beyond individual words, Old Norse also influenced English grammar.
Really?
For example, it contributed to the simplification of verb endings, which had been more complex in Old English.
So the Vikings didn't just, raid and plunder. They actually reshaped the English language in some pretty fundamental ways.
They did. It makes you think about how history is woven into the very words that we use every single day.
It really does. But the Viking influence was just the beginning, right? Because I know there's another major shakeup coming, 1066, the Norman Conquest.
That's right, and trust me, this is where things get really interesting.
Okay.
The Norman Conquest wasn't just a political and social upheaval, it was a linguistic earthquake.
Yeah.
It really laid the foundation for the English we speak today.
I'm on the edge of my seat. So the Normans brought their own language and culture to England. What happened when Old English collided with Norman French? That's what we'll uncover in the next part of the deep dive.
Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Before the break, we were talking about the Norman conquest of 1066, and I don't think we can overstate just how much this event changed England, not just politically and socially, but for the language, too.
It's true. William the Conqueror, right. He and his Norman forces, they brought with them their own language, Norman French, which was basically a dialect of Old French. So how did this new language mix with the Old English that was already spoken in England?
Well, it's really fascinating. Imagine England suddenly having two official languages.
Whoa, okay.
Old English, spoken by the common people,
Right.
and then Norman French, spoken by the ruling class, the nobility.
So basically England became like a bilingual nation overnight. Did people try to learn each other's languages?
Over time, yeah.
Yeah.
But initially there was a very stark linguistic divide.
Okay.
Norman French held the prestige, it held the power. I mean, it was the language of the law, the government, high society.
Right.
Think about words like justice, parliament, royal.
Oh, yeah.
All these words are from Norman French, and they really reflect their areas of influence.
That's so interesting. So how did this linguistic power dynamic shape the English language? I mean,
Yeah.
It wasn't like Old English just disappeared.
No, of course not. Instead of one language totally replacing the other, something incredible happened. They started to merge.
Oh, wow.
So Old English and Norman French began to borrow words and grammatical structures from each other, and this created this hybrid language that eventually became Middle English.
That is amazing. It's like you threw these two languages into a linguistic blender and out popped Middle English.
Yeah.
How much of the English that we speak today can be traced back to this Norman French influence?
Oh, a lot. The Norman conquest had an enormous impact on English vocabulary.
Okay.
Even to this day, roughly 30% of English words, which is about 10,000 words, have French origins.
10,000 words. That's mind-blowing. So what kinds of words are we talking about here? Besides, the government and law terms we mentioned earlier.
Oh, the influence of Norman French is everywhere.
Yeah, I bet.
Have you ever noticed, for example, that we often have two words for a lot of foods? We have pig from Old English, and then pork from Norman French. Cow is Old English, but beef is Norman French.
Hey, so you're saying the words pig and cow, they represent the animals themselves, as raised by English farmers, but then the words pork and beef represent the food on the plates of the Norman elite.
You got it. It's a perfect example of how social hierarchy and cultural influence are embedded in language. And this pattern, it extends to chicken and poultry, sheep and mutton, so many others.
This is fascinating. Food words became like a marker of social class. I'll never look at a menu the same way again. So the Norman conquest, it reshaped the very vocabulary of English. But what about pronunciation? I've heard about something called the Great Vowel Shift. Did that happen around this time?
The Great Vowel Shift came a bit later, happened in the 15th century, but it's definitely a crucial part of the story of English. It was this major change in how English vowels were pronounced. So imagine the sound of words just shifting over time, almost like this slow motion linguistic earthquake.
Okay, I'm intrigued, but I'm also a little confused. How do vowels just shift, and why does it matter?
Well, it's a pretty complex phenomenon, and linguists are still kind of puzzled by it today.
Okay.
But we know it happened gradually, over about a century. One theory is it might have been driven by social and geographic mobility.
Okay.
After the Black Death,
Yeah.
And this might have led to a blending of regional dialects. And the reason why it matters is that this shift is one of the main reasons why English can be so difficult. So many of our spellings reflect how words were pronounced before the Great Vowel Shift.
So basically we're stuck with spellings that no longer match how we say the words.
Exactly. Take the word knife, for example. In Middle English, it was pronounced more like neef.
Neef, okay.
With that long E sound.
Right.
But during the Great Vowel Shift, that E sound changed to the A diphthong.
Okay.
Creating the pronunciation that we have today. But the spelling remained the same?
It's like the English language went through this voice change but forgot to update its ID card. No wonder people find English spelling confusing. But even with all these pronunciation shifts and changes, we must be getting closer to a version of English that sounds at least a bit more familiar, right? We're moving into the era of early modern English, the language of Shakespeare.
We are. By the late 15th and 16th centuries, Middle English had evolved into early modern English. And while it's still not exactly the English that we speak today, it's recognizable enough that we can, appreciate the works of Shakespeare and other writers from this period.
I see. Okay, so Shakespeare, he's often considered like the ultimate master of the English language.
Yeah.
But how different was his English from what we speak today? If we could time travel back to his time, would we be able to understand what people were saying?
You would definitely encounter some differences in vocabulary, grammar, and pronunciation. For example, words like thou and thee were still commonly used as pronouns.
Right.
And verb conjugations were a little different, but for the most part, yeah, you'd be able to follow along with the Shakespearean play, especially if you were, familiar with the plot.
That's good to know. I'm just imagining what it would sound like. The YouTube video we're using, it actually has a short clip of a Shakespearean play being read aloud.
Oh, cool.
And it's just amazing how Even though the language is different, the power of Shakespeare's words still comes through.
Yeah. It's a testament to the beauty and the complexity of language and how much it can endure over time,
Yeah.
you know. And here's a fun fact.
Okay.
American English is actually closer to Shakespeare's pronunciation than most modern British accents.
Wait, really? How is that possible?
Well, during the colonization of America, English settlers, they brought with them the pronunciation patterns of their time.
Okay.
And then, as British English continued to evolve, some of these older pronunciation features were actually preserved in American English.
Interesting.
So, of course, American English has developed its own unique characteristics over time.
Sure.
But there's still these echoes of early modern English in the way that Americans speak today.
So in a way, Americans are speaking a form of linguistic time capsule.
Exactly. But the story of English, it doesn't stop there.
Mhm.
You know, as England's influence expanded through exploration and colonialism, the English language set sail across the globe. And as it traveled, it picked up new words and influences along the way. And this is where we enter the era of modern English, which is what we'll explore in the final part of our deep dive.
We are back for the final part of our deep dive into the history of the English language, and wow, what a journey it has been.
I know, right? From those ancient Indo-European roots to Old English to, wow, to today, so much change.
You know, it's kind of amazing to me how English, with all of these outside influences, has managed to maintain a distinct Englishness about it. How is that even possible?
Well, I think that really speaks to just how adaptable and resilient language is. You know, it can absorb all of these new elements, but still keep a core identity.
So what are some of those core elements that really make English, what makes it stand out from all those other languages?
You know, one of the key things I always think of is its relatively simple grammar.
Oh, yeah.
Compared to many other languages, English has shed a lot of those complexities. You know, all those verb conjugations and noun declensions.
Oh, don't remind me. I remember trying to learn German in high school, and those verb conjugations were just a nightmare.
Right.
And then you look at English verbs, and they just seem so much more straightforward.
And that grammatical simplicity is actually a big part of why English has become such a widely spoken language.
Really?
Yeah, it's really easy for people to pick up the basics.
Makes sense.
Mastering the nuances of English, well, that's a different story. Could take a lifetime.
It could. So you're saying simpler grammar equals a more popular language. Huh. I never thought of it that way. But let's face it, when it comes to English, there is one big elephant in the room.
What's that?
Spelling. Why is English spelling so irregular and, frankly, confusing?
English spelling. The bane of every student's existence.
Right.
Like we talked about earlier, a lot of those spelling quirks, those weird spellings, are because of the great vowel shift. So our spellings today still reflect how words were pronounced centuries ago, but not how we pronounce them today.
It's like English is stuck in a time warp, clinging to those old spellings even though pronunciation has moved on. Do you think English spelling will ever be reformed?
Oh, that's a debate that's been going on for centuries.
Has it really?
Yeah, there have been so many attempts to simplify English spelling.
Makes sense to me.
They've all faced a lot of resistance, though.
Really? Why? It seems like a no-brainer to me.
I know, but you got to think about it. First, there's a very strong attachment to tradition.
Okay.
A lot of people see the current spelling system, as messed up as it is, as just part of English's history, part of its character.
I can see that.
And second, there's just no one agreed upon way to actually do it, to reform spelling. Different proposals, advantages, disadvantages. It's hard to get everyone on board with the same thing.
So we're stuck in a linguistic stalemate.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
We just have to live with those quirky spellings, at least for now.
I guess so. But hey, even with all of its spelling challenges, English has become a global language.
Oh, yeah.
It's everywhere. It's used in business, in science, in diplomacy, on the internet, entertainment.
It's true. English is the dominant language of international communication.
Oh, yeah.
And you know, a lot of that has to do with the influence of the British Empire.
Oh, yeah.
You know, they spread English to all corners of the globe through colonization.
And we can't forget about the influence of American English.
Oh, right. American English has definitely become a major force in shaping global English.
All those Hollywood movies, music, TV shows have played a big role, I think.
Absolutely. It's fascinating to see how all the different varieties of English are interacting and influencing each other.
It really is. It's like English is this constantly evolving organism.
It is.
Adapting to all these new environments, absorbing new influences. Makes you wonder what the future holds for the English language.
It does. And that's the thing about language. It's never static.
True.
It's always changing. It's always adapting
That's right.
to meet the needs of its speakers.
So even though we can trace the history of English back centuries, we have no idea what it will look like or sound like in the future. It's like we're part of this ongoing linguistic experiment.
We are.
We're all contributing to the evolution of English.
Every time we speak, write, even text.
Exactly. So what do you think, what are some of the factors that will shape the future of English?
Well, I think technology is going to play a huge role.
Oh, definitely.
The way that we communicate is changing so fast.
Yeah, with all the new platforms and new technology.
Exactly. And that has to impact the language itself.
Yeah, we're already seeing that. All those new words and phrases popping up from social media and the internet.
I know, it's like language is trying to keep up with the pace of all the technological change.
It really is. But it's not just technology, it's globalization, right?
Mm.
And migration, bringing people from different cultures and linguistic backgrounds in contact with each other.
And all of that cross-cultural exchange will create new linguistic blends and variations.
Wow, it's exciting to think about all the possibilities. Who knows what amazing new words and expressions will be coined in the years to come?
That's the beauty of it.
But one thing's for sure, the story of English is far from over. It's this ongoing saga, full of twists and turns and unexpected surprises.
And the best part is, we all get to be a part of it. As we wrap up this deep dive into the history of the English language, I encourage you all to keep exploring, keep appreciating the richness and complexity of this amazing language.
Absolutely. So, next time you are reading a book, watching a movie, just chatting with your friends, take a moment to think about the incredible journey that the English language has taken to get to this point.
That's a great point.
And who knows, maybe you will even coin a new word or phrase that will become part of the ever-evolving tapestry of English. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into the history of the English language.
Thanks, everyone.